Well, hello Mika, and welcome to be the guest of this conversation. I'm happy you are here.
And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
And Mika Ojakangas is the professor of political sciences at the University of Jyväskylä, and also the author of this book on the Greek origins of biopolitics, which came out from Routledge in 2016, which I want to discuss with you today. But maybe we can start with the definition. So this book is on biopolitics, but what kind of power exactly are we talking about when we talk about biopolitics?
It depends. Because nowadays, like biopolitics may mean almost anything. But in my book, I relied on Foucault's definition of biopolitics and biopower. Mr. Foucault didn't invent the notion, but he used it as an analytical tool for his studies in history. And for Foucault and for me, biopolitics is politics or power that focuses on the everyday life of individuals. And what does it mean? Of course, every kind of power focuses somehow on individual lives and everyday life. But it might be clarified by comparing it to what Foucault calls sovereign power or juridical power or power of law. What kind of power is the power of law or this sovereign power? It is that power or the law prohibits something that you should not do. You should not kill other people. Mm-hmm. And if you kill, you transgress the law, and then you are punished. That's what Foucault meant by sovereign or juridical power or legal power. Biopower, in contrast, is something that doesn't necessarily prohibit anything, but it promotes. It makes you behave some way. Like it doesn't prohibit, but it regulates your behavior or conduct in everyday life. It's more like guidance in the sense that it makes you to want something by yourself. It is not that kind of, doesn't necessarily restrict anything, but it makes you to desire, for instance, health and public health care or public health is one domain of biopolitics. It doesn't necessarily restrict anything, but it makes you to desire health. And health in modern society is a kind of norm that everybody wants, but it's not something that has always been like that. Like in medieval Europe or early modern Europe, health wasn't any kind of primary goal of human life, but nowadays it is. That's probably some definition of power. Mm-hmm.
And at least in Mr. Foucault's history of sexuality, he's claiming that sexuality is like a quintessential example of application of biopower. Controlling sexuality is a way of controlling such biological features of the human life as generation, childbearing, and so on. So these are, I guess, some examples that Foucault.
This is Foucault's primary example in history of sexuality. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That biopolitics or power is something that tries to regulate or human life on the very basic level of biology or biological existence of human race. Mm.
But in Foucault's analysis, he's discussing biopower as an exclusively modern phenomenon. So he's basically claiming that biopower was formed and born in the modern era. But do you disagree with this timing and this interpretation in your book? Can you trace biopower back all the way, or biopolitics all the way back to ancient political philosophy? And this is interesting, I think, because I assume that there's a lot of conversation around Foucault that kind of agrees with Foucault that biopower relates to the modern era. So why are you suggesting this kind of wider scope of tracing biopolitics back all the way to antiquity?
Anyone who reads Plato, for example, Plato's Republic, who has also read Foucault and knows something about biopolitics, I think immediately recognizes that, for instance, the book 5 of the Republic is nothing but biopolitics, nothing but biopower. It's about eugenic regulation of sexuality and reproduction. It's so evident. I think it's even too evident that Plato and also Aristotle, when they speak about politics, it's mainly biopolitics, not that kind of sovereign politics or sovereign power that Foucault says that prevailed before modern era and before biopolitical era. To my mind, it is strange that nobody has done it before me. That because, as I said, I think it's almost too obvious. This doesn't mean that there's no difference between ancient and modern biopolitics. One difference is that in modern biopolitics, the motive or the goal of biopolitics is many times, not always, prosperity or more precisely the wealth or economy of the nation state. And these economic questions in ancient writers like Plato and Aristotle, they are they are not absent, but the role is smaller. So, and even in Plato is almost minimal. But that's also perhaps the difference between Plato and Aristotle, because Aristotle thinks that one of the aims of politics, which to me is mainly biopolitics, is to make the city-state as wealthy as possible. Simply, the reason was that I read Plato.
That's a good reason.
Of course, already when I was a student, and then I read. At the same time, I read Foucault, and I saw the similarities or the biopolitical aspects, or even the biopolitical essence of Plato's political thinking, and how remote, how different Plato's political thinking is from political thinking of those authors that Foucault identified as the authors of sovereign power, like Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes' political thinking is I think totally different from Plato's. Thomas Hobbes tries to, or he criticizes and tries to turn Aristotle around and criticizes Aristotle, especially because Aristotle's political thinking is biopolitical, that the human being is by nature its own political animal. And Hobbes says that no, that's not true. And Aristotle says that human being is a political animal just like bees, ants, and cranes. And Hobbes says that no, that's not true. The foundation of the political community is a contract, which is something totally different from Aristotle's and Plato's naturalism, in which human being is not that different from the animals living in a community having a common goal, as Aristotle says. And actually, this famous passage in Aristotle's History of Animals that there are other political animals than human beings. Plato says the same. I mean, it's actually a quotation from Plato, but Aristotle doesn't say it. But anyway, Plato doesn't mention cranes. I've never understood why cranes are political animals,
But they are fascinating animals.
Yeah.
You have two chapters which I found extremely interesting that analyze what you call Plato's state racism, which is again a term that is stemming from Foucault's thinking. And I found it particularly interesting how you show in your analysis how little or perhaps no tolerance there is in Plato's political ideal for sickness or something that compared to some presumed standard of health or normality would appear as a disability. Like there doesn't seem to be a lot of room for this. And I'm wondering, first of all, why? Why is there such a focus on health and able-bodiedness in Plato's political utopia? And also, why is state racism as such interested precisely in this aspect of human population?
For Plato, not only like bodily health, but also mental health is really important. And sometimes I think that Plato's ethics or even politics is a kind of psychiatry or mental hygiene. But you are right that health is really important, and he compares all the time justice, for instance, with health. Justice is a state of soul, which is strange. But nowadays we never say that justice is a state of soul. Justice is like for the soul as health is for the body. Plato says in the Republic. But why is it so? I don't know. I mean, it perhaps could be explained by Plato's theory of ideas, that Plato wants everything to be perfect, eternal, like ideas, and all the particular things in the temporal world, they are good to the extent that they imitate those perfect ideas. So there is the idea of health, which is perfect health. And the more healthy you are in this world, in this temporal world, the better you are, because you resemble the idea of health. But this is kind of immanent explanation, I would say, that Plato immanent explanation. Another explanation would be perhaps, but I don't give it in my book, but it would be that Hippocratic medicine, or the Greeks, or at least the philosophers, they thought that the medical art in Greece it has been, since Hippocrates, it's been like a success story. And I think that Plato admired Hippocrates and the Greek medical art, and at least he took vocabulary of his philosophy from medicine. So he kind of imitated medical terms and used them like catharsis and all this stasis and that kind of terms. Stasis means sickness in Greek medicine, and stasis is usually translated as civil war. But Plato says that stasis, in the Sophists he says that stasis is sickness, and it is the root cause of everything bad in the world. But there are other important notions and concepts in Plato that also borrowed from medical language.
And this makes me think of ancient art of physiognomy, which basically postulates a correlation or interdependence between physical and mental health, or saying that the state of the soul is somehow reflected in the state of the body. Would Plato kind of follow this tradition of saying that the mental health and the physical health are related to each other?
Yes and no. It depends on the book, or which books we are talking about. That in his early works, as probably everybody knows, that the body is the enemy of the soul, and all the evil that resides in the soul is caused by the body, because it is the body. Body is bad, soul is the good, body is temporal, soul is eternal. And but even in this phase, Plato thought that the body corrupts the soul. But in his early works, he says that body corrupts the soul inevitably. So and the goal of a philosopher is to get rid of the body totally and to die. Actually, Plato says that we don't achieve what we desire before we die. So Plato wants to die. In his late work, like and I think Timaeus, for instance, there's an interesting passages and even chapters that discuss relation between the body and the soul and how they affect each other. And but at that point in his career, body is not only bad thing. So, but it is more ambivalent. That the body, if the body is in bad condition, then it has it may, and it corrupts the soul as well. But if your body is in good condition, then there's a kind of they work together, and this is also in the Republic. The ideal philosopher is healthy, not in good shape, and but also of course smart and virtuous and so on. But in his late work, body and the soul or their condition depend on each other.
And what exactly is meant by state racism?
It is a notion coined by Foucault again, and it's not exactly about races like we understand nowadays, but precisely about health and sickness, whether you are fit or unfit for the society. State racism is something that discriminates. It's a form of power that discriminates those who are conceived as unfit or sick or somehow incapable of contributing to the common weal of society. In Foucault's works, examples are unemployed, disabled, old people, whosoever who is not seen as fit for society, and and of course not productive enough, or somehow preventing development of the human race or society, or in the end the human race. And it is also closely connected to the theory of degeneration that was developed in the 18th century. That some specimen, some men, women are mentally or bodily or somehow inferior, so much inferior that they shouldn't reproduce because those traits are inherited by their children and so on. And that's kind of constellation on the basis of which Foucault developed his notion or theory of state racism, that it is racism that the state or the government, it's racism in which those unfit people are either, anyway, they are already excluded from society, but the state or the government or administration or whatever, either they try to treat them and make them healthy, previously they were sick, or they are totally excluded from society, or in the end they are probably killed. And a good example of state racism is are of course those sterilization laws, eugenic laws that were established in 1920s and 30s in Nordic countries and also in Germany and also in some states in the United States.
And Plato seems to also adore certain eugenic ideals of controlling the population.
Yes, very strongly. Yes, both in the Republic, in the Statesman, and in the laws. That in the Republic he says that only the best individuals, both women and men, should be allowed or are allowed to reproduce in the best state or the best form of government, which is kingdom of philosophers, and bad individuals or inferior individuals that are suffering from some mental or bodily problems, they are not allowed to reproduce. They are not allowed to having sex. This is how Plato formulates it, that sex is forbidden for them. And if they have sex, and if a child is born, he or she should be killed.
Yeah, this ideal seems to continue. Immediately I'm thinking of Seneca's De Ira, for example. He's also suggesting that certain babies should be killed from the beginning on.
Yeah, that's right. And Aristotle says the same. But of course, the exposure of children was quite common in Greek world and also in the Roman world, because the poor people, they couldn't afford to have very many children, so some of the children were kind of abandoned just. But it wasn't that kind of active eugenic policy that Plato and Aristotle promotes. Aristotle, for instance, says that usually people think that Aristotle is more liberal than Plato, but this is not exactly the case. I mean, in this regard, that Aristotle says in the Politics that the state authorities should supervise when and in what conditions couples should have sexual intercourse, which is kind of weird, at least in the Greek context, or Athenian context, which was pretty liberal. And what was the kind of motto for the Democrats and also the critics was that in Athens everybody can live as they wish, that nobody is controlling when or in what condition they are having sex. And Aristotle also says that if somebody doesn't obey these rules, a woman should make an abortion. Or if the child is born, it should be abandoned or exposed, as they do.
So basically, biopolitics continues from Plato to Aristotle, but it somewhat changes.
Aristotle, in the end, he was Plato's student, so the difference is not that big. I mean, Aristotle disagreed with some things like the theory of ideas and transmigration of soul and so on, but otherwise, I mean, with regard to those eugenic policies, I think he agreed. Aristotle didn't like this communism, or it is used to call communism, Plato's communism in the Republic, that for the Guardians all things are common, including women and children. But actually Aristotle criticizes Plato for it, that Plato doesn't regulate the number of children in the Republic. That Plato doesn't have any plan for that. That what is the number of children, or what is the size of the population? For Aristotle is really important, but it is important for Plato also in the laws, in which where Plato says that the number of citizens should be, and it should always be the same, 5,040.
That's a very precise number.
Yeah.
Finally, I would like to ask you, because for Foucault, his investigation of history was ultimately for him a way of opening critical perspectives to the present or the society we live in. So how is it for you? Do you feel that your investigation in the ancient biopolitics helps to widen the perspectives of understanding the Western tradition of thinking?
Yes, I think so, because if you think about what happened in the 19th and the 20th centuries, or the worst aspects, like I think in the 19th century, I mean, I'm thinking about ideas. In the 19th century, like this theory of degeneration and that kind of state racism that was born, that arose then, and if we think about 20th century and especially Nazism, and after Nazism, or it was not only about Nazism, but there was a Nazism in other countries than in Germany. Nazism, which wasn't like openly Nazi ideology, but those ideas that Nazis had, like these eugenic ideas, they were really widespread. Like a lot of doctors, a lot of people in Finland, in Sweden, in the United States, they way of thinking was exactly the same. So they were not Nazis. It was possible that they were social democrats, they were liberals, but nevertheless they shared same ideas. These state racist, eugenic ideas of degeneration, for instance. But after the Second World War, when intellectuals and scholars started to explain phenomenon of Nazism, for instance, they saw it, like for instance Hannah Arendt, they saw it as an exception. It was some exceptional in the history of Western culture. My point was to show that it wasn't exceptional, that it is kind of part and parcel of Western thinking. It is something that kind of goes through the entire history, not entire history, but it begins that kind of state racist, eugenic idea of degeneration. It starts when the so-called Western culture begins in ancient Greece, in classical Greece, in the same place where the Western civilization was born. I'm not sure about this, but we usually suppose that it was born there. And also that there's something desperately wrong in the Western civilization then. And if we want to criticize Nazism, if we want to criticize authoritarianism, we should not think that they are some kind of totalitarianism, that they are some kind of exceptions, and now we are kind of living again this Western normal pace, that which is democratic and liberal, but that in our tradition somehow inscribed this dark side. And if we want to criticize it nowadays or today, we should see that we should try to deconstruct or show that it is a part of civilization, the entire Western civilization, and we have to find ways to dismantle or to get rid of, or at least to somehow handle this thing, that it is not external to our tradition, it's not exceptional, but it is somehow at the core or even part of the essence of this tradition. But this is not to say that I'm claiming in the book, for instance, that the entire Western history is permeated by biopolitical thinking. One of the main points that's actually in the book is that Christianity marks a kind of rupture or a break in the history of biopolitics, because the Christians, especially the early Christians, were not interested in bodily vigor or the size of the population or that kind of things. So it wasn't important at the time. And the reason that why modernity is the era of biopolitics, as I see it, is the renaissance of the classical or ancient Greek culture, that all the texts lost or found again in 13th and 14th century, like Aristotle's Politics, and translated into Latin, was very important for the birth or rebirth of biopolitics in modern era.
And this is also one thing that was really eye-opening for me reading your book, and that I found extremely interesting and topical, of showing the continuities of ancient thinking to modern era, and also kind of using biopolitics as a prism through which we kind of can critically reread the Western tradition of political thought. So I found this extremely topical and fascinating. So finally, Mika, I would like to ask you, what are you working on now, and what can we expect next from you?
Yeah, I'm writing a book on Plato and democracy. And I started it again like as a commentary on the 8 pages of the Republic in the book 8. There's a chapter, it's not a chapter, it's just a couple of pages. Plato writes on democracy, and it's really fascinating piece. And I thought that, okay, my material is only 8 pages, and I will write quite quickly a book, short book, on those 8 pages, a commentary on it. Okay, it's not a short book. And it was not enough to read those 8 pages time and again, but to read whole Plato's corpus, because at some point I realized that almost all the ideas Plato has are directed against democracy. Not only that in democracy people are too free, it's a kind of democracy is anarchy, and democratic man or woman, democratic citizen is somebody who follows only his desires or appetites. But I kind of realized at some point that the theory of, or his criticism of imitation is against democracy. His criticism of multitasking, it is usually translated as busybody. I don't know if it's good translation, but people who do many things at the same time. It's a criticism of democracy. Why? Because in democracy, citizens always, at least in Athenian democracy, in which 99% of the population, 99% of the citizens worked for their living, which is kind of what was it was news for me, because I always thought that we used to think that they don't have to do anything because they had slaves and so on, but only rich people had enough slaves that they didn't have to work, and it was 1% of the population. So the elite was really small. The elite to which Plato and his friends belonged. But anyway, in the Athenian democracy, everybody had at least 2 jobs. Everybody was a politician, and at the same time, everybody was worked for a living. Carpenter, potter, farmer, and a politician, because everybody had the right to participate in politics, in the assembly, in the people's court, wherever. But Plato thought that the politician must be a politician, or the statesman. And he is an expert who has a politica techne, who knows political art, which is like that politics is like doing politics is something technical. And that's why in Gorgias, it is for Socrates, it is possible to say that I'm the only politician in Athens today, and I'm the only who takes up political craft or political art. Because Plato thinks that politics is something that one person can do, but the Greeks, the Democrats, thought that politics is about debate, about negotiation, about compromise, and it always involved many people. And in Athenian democracy, it involved all the citizens. So this polypragmosune or polypragmon, which is the Greek word for the multitasker or multitasking, is also Plato's criticism of multitasking is criticism of democracy, but there are many other things that I found out during my inquiry. So,
well, democracy, I find, is right now an extremely topical, extremely important topic. So I'm all for democracy. I'm a little bit skeptical about multitasking too. So I think I really need to read your book once it comes out. But thank you, Mika. It was great talking with you today, and I look forward to reading more from you.
Thank you.